Praise the Lord. Many of you have been asking questions on health-related issues of the mind. And some of it is really not spiritual. They are very academic, very technical, very medical. So, we have with us Dr. John Vijayasagar. He's the head of the Department for Psychiatry in NIMHANS and a very faithful, wonderful believer from our prayer group. And I requested him and I said, would you please answer some questions that have come from our church members that will help people on, especially with kids, handling kids in the pandemic. And, you know, I'm so glad that he came forward and he's going to help answer questions. I thank God for the stature that he has in the secular world as an established, honorable psychiatrist, a medical doctor from NIMHANS, right? One of the premier institutions in our country, with so many people working under his care and helping people with mental struggles. So he's going to answer questions. Join in, share this with as many people as you think will benefit, because it gives a perspective, a medical perspective on how to deal with the crisis, not just of the pandemic, but of the mind. What trauma will children face? This is a very deep question. What trauma will children face who have lost their parents due to this pandemic? And how should the caregiver handle such a kid?
Okay. So, this is, as you mentioned, like a very traumatic kind of experience for a child, because losing a parent and losing a spouse, these two things, in psychology we learn about it, like wherein they are categorized as the most stressful life events.
Okay.
So when it comes to stressful life events categorization, losing a child or losing a spouse comes at the top. It can be given 100 out of 100, that kind of score. And everything else is after that. So here for the child, whether it's one parent or both the parents, unfortunately that loss due to the COVID-19 is a very tremendous kind of thing for a child to go through. And also it depends on the age level of the child. So sometimes the child may be very young, like below 6 years of age, 5 years or 6 years of age. In older children, sometimes in younger children, what we see is the understanding about death is not so well established.
Correct.
So till about 6 years of age, they don't understand the irreversibility of death. So they may think that, okay, like this person is, he's not around. So he may have gone somewhere. Like sometimes we say that he has gone to God, or he has gone to heaven or something.
So we'll come back.
His children will believe that, okay, they will come back. Whereas after 6 years, like till about 9 or 10 years, these children, they start understanding that, yes, this is a process, like there is some irreversibility with this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they start feeling that, okay, someone has died, but I will not die.
Okay.
So they feel somewhat invincible and they'll say that, I may not die, so I'm safe kind of thing.
Okay.
Whereas beyond the age of 9 years, from 10 years onwards, they'll understand fully like, okay, death is something that can happen to any one of us. So say for example, my grandparent has died because of COVID in the village. So when my parents become old, one day they'll also die. And when I become old, I'll also die one day. So that will come to them after the age of 10. And also, as they have undergone this extremely traumatic kind of experience, they will need immediate psychological support. That is very important. Also, this psychological support should be major component of that psychological support should be the emotional support. So we should encourage them to talk about this, because sometimes what we adults feel is it's not a very easy thing to talk to a child about death.
Correct.
So that is something all of us, we, like in families, whenever these kind of incidents happen, we keep the children away. And even through that immediate after the bereavement, the mourning process, and so we will take the entire grief upon ourselves, and we think that children will not go through that grief. We'll keep them aside, and in all the rituals, everything, so we'll keep them away, and in fact we may not talk to them about that also. We feel that avoiding that is better as long as possible. So in fact, what the psychologists say is it is advisable to talk to them at the earliest, and also to normalize this, like as far as possible, that emotions.
I think, Doctor, one of the reason why people tend to avoid talking to children, and I'm sure you know this, is because children start asking questions for which caregivers may not have adequate answers.
Yeah. So we have to normalize their emotions, and how we explain about death also is very important, and especially for younger children we need to use very simple, straightforward kind of terms. So we'll have to say that, say for example, if a grandparent has died, so we'll have to say, your grandmother has recently passed away, this is the thing, she has died, and I am feeling sad about it, and she was so dear to us, she had done so many things, in fact she loved you so much, and these things we have to tell, and we'll have to check with the child as to how they are feeling. And also in that age group also, what we see is not all children are the same.
Right.
Some children we see that they'll be very calm, it'll appear as if nothing has happened, they'll not react, and also we'll be worried like why he's like that. So whereas some children will be asking questions, saying that, Mama, why did you put grandfather's photo there?
Correct.
And no, why the other day pastor had suddenly come to our house and he started praying, what is happening? And they spoke about grandma's life and all this thing. What is this? So they may ask questions. Whereas some children we see that they become very emotional, they start crying. And sometimes like what we do as adults some of the times is we don't express our emotions. We have that fear saying that if I cry, my child will see that and he'll also become upset. So we will be holding our this thing, saying that let me not express these emotions. What if my child sees and they become very upset, saying, and but inside we'll be feeling very kind of very deprived and all those. So we'll feel that loss, but at the same time we will, to the surface actually we'll be going on as if nothing has happened. So we can express our emotions, but at the same time it has to be in a very measured and balanced kind of way, and we should encourage the children to express their emotions. Sometimes young children actually, they can express emotions through art, like they may draw something about the departed person, or they may write something about departed person, like somebody who is very creative may just write some poem or something about that, or few sentences. And these kind of things we'll have to do with them, but we need to continue the emotional support for them. We have to ensure that someone stays with them, and also we need to ensure that some routine is maintained, like they are taken care of, they are sleeping at the right time, they are provided the nutritious food, and some routine is maintained, somebody is there to take care of them. And also at specific time, like suppose after a year, when the death anniversary of that person comes, we have to involve the children in that, like so they can prepare a collage of their photos with their grandmother or grandfather, whoever has departed, with all the family. So involving them in those kind of process, and reminding them of some of the joyful memories what they had with that person when they lived. So that will help them to slowly, and also each child, like in the adult, the grief process, in child also, some children, they are able to get over it very quickly. Some children, it will take time. And also it depends on their attachment with that person.
Correct.
Here in this example, it is both the parents.
Right.
It's going to be very difficult. So just a couple of days back, I had seen one child in our hospital OPD where father died 1 year back. This was not related to COVID. Father died with some other medical condition. Mother died 1 month back due to some brain tumor. So it's very unfortunate. So now currently some of the relatives are taking care of him. But he developed depression. So in that context, they are brought. So we are basically working with him closely and providing emotional support.
Wow.
And so whenever he has that certain memories, it may come as what we call sudden flashbacks kind of thing, those memories. he has a lot of anxiety and he feels very giddy and he falls down. Then again, he's fine. And we told the family that you just support his normal routine, let him go around, and so that some of these, like play and some of these things, he should not be deprived. So the childhood normal experience has to continue, and so that healing process we have to assist. And of course, most important thing for us, we have to pray. So I think nothing more, can help better than a prayer, like family prayers. So getting together and praying and remembering our children in the prayers, because as a unit, like when we pray, so that I have seen, like really that helps the entire family to cope with the separation and loss.
Wow. The healing process, we have to assist them through all of these methods. So, another parent has asked, one of my friends who is COVID positive is psychologically affected and having fears, phobias. So, an intermittent question. Is phobia and fear the same?
So these are two different terms. Fear is basically a state of mind where there is a lot of apprehension. Like in the case of anxiety, there is a lot of apprehension about a specific stimulus, about a particular object or some event or stimulus. Like for example, I may have some fear about, like suppose if I'm driving, suddenly I may have a fear that what if there is some roadblock ahead or something like so. I have not even had my lunch or something like so. How I'm going to reach the destination? There may be some fear, some transient fear may be there. Phobia is again more like a pathological fear. So phobia goes to an extent of it's a disorder.
Okay.
We can have phobias for different kinds of things. Like certain phobias are quite transient. Again, in children, they come at a specific age level, they go off. For example, in very young children, we see fear of darkness. So immediately when lights go off, some power issue, they'll start crying. They'll go and cling to the mother or father. Then we'll light the candle and reassure them, don't worry, Baba, it will come. Or if some inverter or something is there, we'll switch it on, then the power comes. And child will be very happy, saying that, now I'm comforted. They'll leave the parent and they'll sit. So even in the night, they'll not go to the washroom. Like they want the parent to accompany because the lights have to be switched on or something like that. After certain, like especially young children, they'll also have these fears of separation from parents. We call it as separation anxiety. And beyond a certain age, normally we grow out of those anxieties and fears. And by the time we reach our adolescence, we don't have any of those things and we'll get along. And whereas for some people, some of the pathological fears will remain. For example, if we see some people who have fear of animals, certain animals, like fear of dogs. So they will avoid that road, saying that there are a lot of stray dogs. Even if it's 2 kilometers that side, so I'll go around that side. So what if the dog chases me? If it bites, they'll get all these thoughts. Next, I'll be in a hospital. I'll be taking some vaccine. Or if it gets infected, I'm gone. Like those things. So these are the pathological fears. Here in this example, the person has developed the COVID-19 infection. And here his fear may be that he is going to infect the family members. And normally there will be some anxiety and some fear. But if it has to amount to a phobia, it has to be excessive fear, which is unreasonable. So suppose normal fear, say if, say I am the person with an infection. So I will tell my family member saying that I'll stay in this room, you stay in that room, I'll wear the mask. When you serve some food for me, you just leave it on the table, I'll come and eat and go inside. I will, once I finish that, you sanitize that place. That is a normal thing, what we are supposed to do. If that person has unreasonable fear, he'll say, you don't stay in this apartment itself. You leave this place, go off somewhere. Otherwise, you guys will not live. I have developed this. I will definitely infect you. And he'll imagine that they are already lying down in the ICU or something. So if it goes to that level, phobia level, definitely he will require a formal psychiatric evaluation and management.
Wow.
because that will be impairing his day-to-day function, because he will not be at peace of mind, and continuous that state of fear will be there. The moment he sees his family member, he'll start shivering, and he may actually the response maybe he may become very aggressive towards them. He may say, "Why are you guys around?" Like you go, and sometimes he may shout at them, and
So they need help.
or he may completely isolate himself. He'll go into the room, he'll lock the room, he'll not come out, he'll not be eating. So the family members also will have no way to know whether this guy is eating properly, sleeping properly, he's taking care of his personal hygiene and all those things. So he will require a professional help if it is at phobia level.
How to help the kids understand well of their education and career due to the changing systems? Actually, this is more like a technical question on the educational career, not really. I assume it's not really a psychiatric kind of question.
It's
but
actually what Pastor I think is that it's some psychological aspects are also there. I would like to answer. So the changes that have happened in the education system, these have been drastic, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, because this online to this extent was not there earlier.
Okay.
And also, I think more than a year now, schools being closed and the exams getting cancelled. And also there was a lot of uncertainty about that initially. And so government also had consulted multiple experts, and they took some time. So even the courts, they have mentioned that you just have to, there is no way we could ensure that in a country like ours with so many children, so we can conduct the exams, and that too when the vaccination was just starting, so that nobody would be willing to expose them, teachers, children, all these parents, to risks. So these are the some kind of very unusual changes that have happened. So definitely children are impacted with this, and definitely there is some psychological impact of this kind of changes. And this is also, I would say, one form of stress only for them. So what we should, as parents and caregivers, we should do is, we should openly talk to our children as to how they have taken up these changes, how they have adapted to these changes. Because not everyone would have adapted to the same extent, and definitely some children would have had challenges. Like for example, we see children in the rural backgrounds, they may have internet connectivity issues, and even in the urban setting also we see across the socioeconomic strata, those especially in the lower social strata, they may have challenges in getting these gadgets and all these things. And so even otherwise also, like the transition from like which was a regular classroom kind of teaching to that of an online kind of mode. So children take time to adapt, and now even the exams they have made online.
Correct.
And some of the exams, like for example, board exams, they have cancelled. And even with regards to their career also, for some of these children who are already like say in 12th, and there are certain delays because we are not sure when the colleges will announce all these graduate courses, when it will open. Or even some of the children who have planned their higher studies abroad, things are not open, travel is not open. The other day I was reading in the newspaper, like someone has to go to the US for admitting their children in the university. They are going some crazy kind of route they are taking, like they are going to some Central Asian country, some Kazakhstan, something, then to Dubai, then flying to United States. So all sorts of things they are doing. So it's a quite stressful kind of situation.
Very stressful. Thank you. How will a school-going child deal with no competition and a sense of lack of competition when all the children are promoted to the next class? And so there are two sides to it. So the first part is, this is from some parents in our church, because the children's efforts are not recognized, and there is no scale of marks. But then, I assume there are also a lot of happy kids who know they didn't study at all, and thankfully they are going to move on. Yes. So we leave the happy ones alone. What about the ones who are now really concerned about, the competition in an educational fraternity is actually not just among students, it's across the board, because competition or merits is the real thing that brings quality to the whole structure.
Yes.
So when that whole competition is taken out, the merit factor, the quality factor is very badly wounded. So what is the state of mind? Because there's a lot of confusion. Now, after all this, when they go back to a competitive world, readapting there, what's your take on it?
Yeah. So, healthy competition in academics is very important.
Correct.
And without competition, we would be just allowing the mediocrity.
Correct.
So mediocre kind of performance is not good for any system, not just the academic kind of system. Any system, actually, there needs to be healthy competition. So more so in the education system, all these, whether it's the internal assessments or the final exams, all these things in the education system, they have been incorporated to encourage that competition, healthy competition between students. And what parents need to do in this situation where they have cancelled exams and they have just promoted students from one class to next class, and exams in a way, one is the competition part, second one is that it helps the individual himself or herself, that is the child himself or herself, and also their parents, to gauge their performance.
Correct.
Like suppose if I given a maths exam, if I scored 80 out of 100, so I can still improve. Probably maths is a subject, it's a scoring subject. People score 100 out of 100. So if I'm a good student, so I should have done well. Like I have lost some marks, so I can take it positively. I can think that I have to improve in the next time. And staying in the competition is very important. But this particular situation is very unprecedented. So parents have to explain to their children, saying that it's mostly a one-off kind of thing. So it's not that every year they are going to cancel exams or things like that. So also they need to encourage that to maintain that competitive spirit, what we call in children. Because don't think that just because exams got cancelled this time, you can just allow yourself to remain mediocre. So you will have to excel in these things. And also this being good at things, whether it's the studies or later in their career, and maintaining that healthy competition is, I would say that it's a lifelong process. Correct. And it should not be seen as, and also learning is a lifelong process. So it should not seen as a one-off, saying that, okay, in 10th I topped in the school, that's it. Like, this, I will have this particular medal or something with me, and rest of my life I will keep showing people. Like, no, it's not like that. So it's, parents should encourage that that lifelong thing is very important. Once even they finish their schooling, wherever they are in their higher education, or once they are professionally qualified also, say suppose tomorrow their child becomes an engineer or doctor. So what parents should expect is they maintain that healthy competition at that time. They are one among the good doctors in the city, or one among the good engineers or software professionals or teachers.
Wow. Don't allow your motivation to deplete just because of lack of competition. Amazing. Thank you so very much. Thank you. It was a lovely time talking to Dr. John Vijayasagar. God bless you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
The question about children and parents handling the situation that is busy with their work, and they have just no time for their kids because really the workload is very high. So will the child go into the silo? And what happens?
Definitely that is going to impact the child, in the sense that if there is no alternative caregiver in that situation,
There will be an impact.
yeah, there will be an impact wherein emotional needs are not getting addressed. Child is not getting the appropriate stimulation for his or her development, especially the social development or the language development.